What is happening, everybody? Welcome to Off the Rails, a recovery podcast dedicated to ending the stigma of addiction through open discussion on all things recovery related. My name is Mark, and with me always are Dave and Jared. And Dave is going to introduce our next guest.
Oh yeah, we're so stoked to have our next guest on. He runs one of the most successful goaltending schools in the Toronto area. He's shared his story with over 50 different NCAA athletic departments and hockey teams. Spent 7 years as an addiction counselor with the St. Louis Blues. Is currently lifestyle and addictions coach for the Arizona Coyotes, and most importantly, he's 23 years clean and sober. So please welcome Jamie McGuire.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, Jamie, thank you so much for joining us. Again, we're very grateful to have you. And what we do here is we bring guests on and we get them to share their stories, and in hopes that sharing stories can help others out there still struggling.
Sure.
And again, very thankful. So if you want to take it away and kind of tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, and we'll jump in, ask you some questions.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny when I work with young athletes. I'll get into it in a second, but that's kind of where my addiction really took off, was when I was playing university hockey. And when my whole objective when I go out and talk is to kind of change that young athlete's perspective on what it means to be an alcoholic. So like, I'll ask you guys, and you guys are more educated, but I usually start my talks by asking, what's your definition of an alcoholic? I'll just throw it out there. It doesn't matter whether I'm standing at Harvard or with St. Louis or with you guys. I'll say the same thing. What's your definition of an alcoholic? Don't think, just quick. What would you say?
Mine is continuing to use despite the negative consequences.
Okay, cool. David, just off the top of your head. Now, you guys are educated, so.
Well, I don't know that. I would just say, not being able to put down the drinks, no matter the people you're affecting, yourself, and the values that you're losing.
Okay, so I'll usually what happens is a bunch of kids will put their hands up, and when I say kids, I'm talking 18 to 25 or 18 to 30, and they'll say somebody who drinks every day. And I love that answer because in my opinion, it's not how often you drink that determines whether or not you have an issue, but it's how you behave when you drink that determines. When I was in treatment, and I'll get into my story in a second, but when I was in treatment in 1999, there was a woman there who, it was August, and she said, I've only drank twice this year, and I only drink wine. And I'm thinking, and people are a little bit judgy early in recovery, and I'm like, well, I'm way worse than you are. Like, what are you doing here? And she said, but the 2 times I drank, I have 2 DUIs. I cheated on my husband, and I broke my 6-year-old daughter's arm because I pulled it so hard when I was pissed off at her. She's an alcoholic. She drank twice in 6 months, but she's an alcoholic. And when it's the light bulb kind of goes off when guys hear that and they think, wow, because they've been justifying it for years because they only drink on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or on nights when they don't have games. So my objective is to kind of change the athlete or anyone's perspective on what it means to actually be an alcoholic, in my opinion. Okay, so growing up, I grew up in Richmond Hill. Went to Richmond Hill High School. I played minor hockey in Richmond Hill. I played junior. I got drafted by London. And it's funny, talk about this. My best friend was drafted by the Toronto Marlies at the time, and he trained his ass off all summer long. Bill Armstrong, as a matter of fact, he's now the general manager of the Arizona Coyotes, and he trained his ass all summer long, and I didn't do a thing. And I was cut after 48 hours of camp in London, and he went on and had 4 years of a major junior career. And it was that summer that I was 16, 17 that I really started to find my way into drinking. And again, I didn't drink often, but when I did, I was out of control. Like, it was poor decisions. I was the happy, I love you drunk, hugging everybody. Oh my God, I love you guys. You're amazing. And it's funny the choices and the decisions that you make when your 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 whole life revolves around partying and drinking and so I ended up playing 4 years at tier two, never really maximized my potential. um I didn't really use drugs very often. I mean, I smoked weed a little bit, and I didn't, it wasn't really for me. um I got to university, and in my third year there was a party, a hockey team, football team. There was coke in the room. Guys, I'd never seen it. It was in the movies for me. um and I can still remember that his name is Scott Purdy. He played in the football team. I can still remember him saying, "Okay, Mags, you're up." And fuck, boys, like I was really drunk, and I can remember thinking, I'm only going to do this once. I can't. I'm 23 years old. I'm peer pressure. Like, there was no reason to feel peer pressure, and I didn't want to say no. And I thought, I'm only going to do it once. And the guy beside me, who had never used before either, who's still a really good friend of mine, and we've spoken since, he thought, I'm only going to do this once also. Johnny never used again the rest of his life, and I never stopped for like almost 9 years. And we both meant it. I meant it when I said, I'm only going to do this once. I meant it as much as he did. But I was an addict before I tried. I was an addict before I often say I bent down a scared little boy and stood up Brad Pitt. Like, it changed my world. And, Donnie didn't get that reaction. He had fun that night. He thought it was okay, but he never did it again. For me, my life changed that instant. And I've got a university education. My parents are still together. I've got two brothers and a sister. I'm not your stereotypical drug addict, and it it was like a light switch went off in my brain, and I had determined that the noise stopped for me. The noise stopped, and I truly believed that it was the answer to all my problems. I had a friend who had killed himself that January. And it was not drug related, but it was pretty devastating for our group of friends. You're 23 years old, and one of your best friends at home kills himself. And I'm not, that had, I'll get back to Mike's death in a little bit. That's part of my story too. But, it was a shitty time in my life then, and I was confused, and I didn't understand why Mike did it. And um, it, there's so many different factors that led me to that choice in that moment to use. But looking back, I'm grateful, because at the end of the day, it opened up a whole new world to me as far as looking at my drugs. My alcohol use was concerned. But I didn't use again for about 6 months, but I thought about it every single day. I remember I obsessed over it. I graduated from school. I got home, and you kind of seek it out, right? And for me, it was, I finally found a few of my friends that did it, that kind of were on the down low, and then I figured out who I could get it from, and once I got home, because I didn't really want to make a big deal about it, and I only used when I was drinking. And then I found my own dealer. And that was the end. I lost control of myself. It was, and I remember making deals like, I won't use before 6 o'clock at night. And then it was, okay, well, fuck, I won't use before noon. And then it was, okay, well, I won't use before I go to work. And then it was, I can remember I went, 12 days one time, and I don't think I closed my eyes for more than 10 minutes. And I know you guys have been there, and I'm not trying to glorify it at all or say that I was worse than anybody else, because I don't think I was. But for me, I'm a 200-pound guy. I was 165 pounds by the time I went into treatment. I became so obsessed. It became my entire life. And in the program, it says, you talk about, or an NA, which is what I usually did. It was talk about your life becomes about using and finding ways and means to get more, and that's it. And that's truly how my life, how my life became. I met a girl throughout this period of time who didn't use, and she was pretty straight. And I can remember guys saying, "No, James, thank God for her. You'd be dead." Like, she's the only thing that's going to help you slow down a little bit. And I thought, you know what? If I'm with Christina, I'll slow down, and I should ask her to marry me, because if I'm engaged, I'm going to quit for sure. Like, absolutely 100%, I'm going to stop using. That didn't, trust me, guys, it didn't stop me when I asked her. It made things worse. There was a night we were at, she had a cottage in Muskoka, and I can remember I was driving the boat that night, and I started a fight. I ran out of Coke. So it was gone. I ran out. I started a fight on purpose, and I called my dealer in Toronto, and I said, "Look, I'm gonna meet you at like 3 a.m." So I started a fight with Chris. Ended up back at the cottage. I got in my car, and I remember peeling out of the driveway. I'm 2.5 hours from Toronto, and I'm hammered. And I've got these wake up pills in the car, these pink wake ups that you can get at Shoppers. It's just caffeine. And I was crushing them and snorting them in the car. And I got halfway to North Bay before I got pulled over. I was going the wrong way. Like, I got pulled over. There were like 2 or 3 cars that kind of cornered me, and I got pulled over, and I ended up in I think it was Bracebridge, in the OPP station in Bracebridge. And I can remember, and this is how sick I was, man. I can remember being in jail that night thinking, like, I was crying, and I didn't know what to do. And I'm thinking, you know what? I am never, ever, ever going to run out of Coke again. Like, that was the biggest mistake ever. Did I ever fuck up? Not because I didn't care that I drank and drove. I didn't care about anything else. I was so pissed off that's why I did what I did, because I ran out. And I swear to God, I didn't run out again until the day I quit, which was only 16 months later. But it was funny. I say sometimes that I quit every day for a year. Like, I knew it was wrong, but like, I can remember watching people and thinking, how are they having fun? Like, how are they, like, I was in the cottage, or I was in a room looking out a window at people having fun, water skiing, doing this, doing that, whatever. And I'm thinking, I'm not out there. I'm using in the cottage by myself, sneaking into a bathroom. And I'm thinking, how are they having fun, not high? Like, that's how mixed up your head gets, right? So I get to a point now where it's coming close to the end, right? So my wedding is coming up, and I'm thinking, okay, you know what, boys? I'm not going to use the night of my wedding. Now, I've used every day for 6 years now, right? Every day. But I'm not going to use the night of my wedding, because you know what? I'm just going to take a night off. So huge mistake, because I kept drinking and drinking and drinking. The only thing that keeps me from not passing out or closing my eyes is the fact that I was using Coke at the same time. So I'm a mess that night. Christina and I get out. I was in the basement. We got married at the venue that we were at. I was in the basement. One of my best friends found me on a payphone. I was calling my dealer in Niagara Falls. It was 10 o'clock the night of my wedding. I had just been married, and I was going to take a cab to the falls and try to get there and back without anybody noticing me. And he grabbed me and said, "Are you in your fucking mind? Like, what are you doing? Like, you're not going anywhere." And so I can remember, oh my God, guys, I don't know. So we got back, Christina and I, the girl that I had married, we got back to the hotel, and we're standing in the elevator, and I guess I pass out she's standing facing the door, and behind her. I fall asleep. Doors open, she gets out. Doors close, I'm still in there. I don't know what floor we're on. I don't know where our room is. I don't know anything. So about an hour and a half later, she finds me on a couch in the lobby, brings me back up to the room, and first thing I do is open a bottle of wine, and Anyways, I spilt this huge bottle of wine all over her wedding dress and passed out on the floor. And, you know, in the morning, I wake up, she's in the bed, I slept on the floor, wedding dress is a pillow, covered in red wine. And I thought it was funny. Like I was telling the story. Like I was going, oh, you guys aren't gonna believe what happened last night. Like I look back and there's so much guilt and shame. Like we have zero relationship. We split up after about 18 months, Christina and I. Um, and that's a whole different story. But you know, I feel bad. I look back and I think, you know, you talk about the poor decisions that you make, and it affects so many other people. You know, like she didn't expect to marry an addict. You know, she didn't know what was happening. I had everybody fooled. People knew something was wrong, but they didn't know what it was. You become such a good liar. Fuck, I'm on the 407. I'm at Yonge Street. I'm at Bathurst. Like it's 30 seconds difference. But like you just get used to not telling the truth. And so I got to a point. Now I'm thinking if Christina's pregnant, then I'll quit. So doesn't she get pregnant? Well, certainly doesn't help me. I still does not influence my decision or help me get clean. That's for sure. And I realized I was in such pain and had gone to such a dark place. I realized that I couldn't quit and I had to die. It was quit or die, and I could not quit. It's not possible. I can't do it. I've tried every day. And when I realized I had to die, I got a hotel room out at the airport, and I got a whole bunch of drugs, and I used and I don't think there was never like a suicide attempt there, but it was like I don't care what happens to me right now. I'm going to use as much as I can. I think I spent $3 or $4 that weekend. That money I certainly didn't have. And now I was there on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and it's Sunday morning. I haven't slept, and I thought, what am I doing? Do I really want to die? Like, because now I'm so tired that now I'm ready. I'm going to kill myself now. And that's when I got in my car and I drove to Mike's grave. Goes back 9 years earlier than my buddy who had killed himself. And I remember it was like this awakening I had. Like I remember standing at his grave thinking, like, I didn't understand why you did what you did. You know, you fucked us all around. I don't understand why you did it. It doesn't make any sense. And in that moment, Mike's death made sense to me. He did what he did to save my life, because I stood there and I thought, I can't do to everybody what you did to us. I can't. I still talk to Mike's mom and dad all the time. It's 25 years later, 24 years, or 29 years later. They are still devastated by it. And I thought, I can't do to my friends, I can't do to my family what you did to us. And I know Mike didn't kill himself to save my life. I know that, but his death did. You know, so for me, I can remember standing there thinking, you know what, man, I got this. Like, I can't, you sacrificed yourself for me. And I'm not going to blow that opportunity, you know? And I kind of made a commitment to him at that, and myself, not just to him, but myself more importantly, that, you know, something's got to change. And I phoned my mom, and she picked me up at the cemetery, and I was married. My wife was 5 months pregnant at the time. I went into a 6-week you know, you're dying. You need to get into treatment, and there's an 8-week waiting list. You know, there's a problem with the system, you know. So I do 8 weeks or 6.5 weeks of an outpatient program, the Oak Ridges Addiction Center. And then I did 99 days at Homewood in Guelph, where I learned how to live again and how to. I think one of the best things that happened to me was having 6 weeks clean before I got into treatment. Because a lot of guys I watched, they walked in there and they got the shakes for the first 3 weeks, and then it's 28 days and they're out. They didn't get anything, but I had 6 weeks. So, I mean, it's a bit of a blessing that I had to wait. Um, but and after my first 28 days, they asked me if I wanted to stay again. I thought it was a punishment. I was like, fuck no, are you kidding me? But then I did. And then they asked me to stay again. And I did it 4 times. And when I left there, they convinced me. They didn't have to convince me, but they, in their own, I went in as a drug addict, but I stayed as an alcoholic and an addict. I stayed as an addict. Like, if it makes me feel good, I want more. I don't give a shit what it is. It's working out. It's not working out. It's ice cream. It's French fries. It's whatever it is. If it makes me feel better, I want more. And I think that, and I'm not cured from that. We call it the hungry ghost, right? That insatiable thing inside you that you can never fill. And I have a dragon tattooed to my back. And that's my addiction. It's not going anywhere. It's there always. It's fucking waiting for me to make a mistake. And I learned that life can be fun again. I learned that abstinence is like this much of the solution. That the biggest part of the solution for me was lifestyle change. Guys, I didn't set foot into a licensed restaurant for 5 years. Not even like I said, not even a Swiss chalet. Like, I didn't set foot in a licensed restaurant for 5 years. That was my goal. Like, it's easy to say no, but it's easier not to have to. I kept myself out of those situations. I work with a lot of addicts today who are still, what are you doing this weekend? Well, I'm going to the baseball game with the guys. Are you out of your mind? Like, yeah, you might not drink, but why put yourself in that situation with 6 other guys that are going to be loaded? Like, you crazy? Like, I don't say it that way. I certainly try to talk them through it in a different way. But because at the end of the day, you're going to make your own choices. But for me, that's how I had to handle it. And, I guess I remember when I told, you underestimate everybody in your life. You're afraid. You don't want to tell. I stayed using because there was so much guilt and shame. And I didn't want to tell my parents, and I didn't want to tell my brothers and sister and my best friends. And because my really good, close group of friends, they didn't know, but I hid it from them. And that was helpful for me in the end when I got clean, because I didn't have to give that group up. Those guys that I played with, there's a picture on my wall of 1987. I'm looking at it right now. A group of guys, there's still 5 or 6 of us that are really, really tight off that team. And I didn't use with them. So I had that support. But I remember my sister crying when I told her. And I was like, what's the matter? And she's like, well, now I know why you missed my graduation and all my dance recitals. And it wasn't because you were an asshole. It's because you were sick. You had an issue. And well, my dad, the story about my dad I tell is, I was in the basement. My mom had brought me to my parents' house, and he sat down, and I said, Dad, I have a drug problem. And he said, you're not smoking that weed shit, are you? And I said, no, it's cocaine. And he stood up, he punched me right in the face, and he said, okay, how can we get you help? And he's never been angry about it since. He got angry. And he's never touched me before that, never touched me after that. But he was, and how can we get you help? And my parents never turned their back on me. My friends never turned their back on me. My family, I underestimated everybody in my life. I truly did. And I underestimated myself. I didn't think I could do it. And I've worked, my clean date is June 28th, 1999. It was 23 years on this past June. And, you know, so many opportunities have been opened up to me as a result of everything that I went through. You know, my recovery isn't based just on NA or AA. You know, there's some spirituality in it, and there's, you know, I was in treatment, and I remember an addictions counselor was my roommate from BC, and he was a heroin addict. And he had this book, Awaken the Buddha Within, on the shelf. I said, "What's that?" He said, "Oh, my mother gave it to me. I'll never read it. You take it." Loved it. Changed my world again. You know, changed my world. It was written by a guy named Lama Surya Das, and I've done 5 or 6 meditation retreats with him now. He's a bit of a mentor. Like you know, so I'm not grounded in just because I got hooked on NA too. I was anchor area treasurer. I had my own home group. I was like doing 2-a-days. Like that became an addiction for me. In the first 5 or 6 years, I was hooked, you know, but it wasn't healthy. No. Going to meetings is healthy, but not the way I was. Like I said before, I'm an addict, right? So I truly have to find, I still to this minute have to find balance in my life. My 22-year-old daughter, who was in the womb when I got clean and sober, just graduated from UBC with her master's in social work, specializing in addiction treatment, which is pretty cool for me. And using art therapy to help addicts, and has been working in treatment centers, doing co-ops for the last 2 years, and is really cool because she's she hasn't been alive for me to use, but it's just such a big part of my story and our life. And it was really cool that she went down that road, and it was cool because it gave us something to connect. We connected through it while she was away at school too. I don't know, guys. I have taken, I think what I learned in treatment when they were saying, you should quit drinking too, is my first reaction was back up. I don't have an issue. I don't drink very often. But when I broke down how I drank and the binge drinking and the diving over tables at last call, because I need 6 more, and the blackouts, and, everybody called me a half miler because I'd always pass out. Thank God there wasn't Red Bull around when I was 16, because, at least I fell asleep, without it. But even Red Bull, early, 6 or 7 years into recovery, when I finally would go out again and do things, I'd have a Red Bull. Well, fuck. Next time I went out, I'm like, well, I had 1. I mean, I can have 2. 8 months later, I'm having 6 Red Bull between 10 and midnight. I was up for 2 days. Like, honest to God, it was a fucking nightmare. It was like I was on coke again. And so, like, I don't even drink Red Bull anymore. But I was pounding them at the bar. It was like they were, okay, I found my thing now. But again, right? Like, and it was progressive. It was like the 1. And then next time I had 2. And the next time I had 4. And then it was out of control. So, I mean, I got to be careful. I have to be careful with anything that I do still today. But it's, the type of drunk that I was, the type of drinker that I was, shirt off at the bar as much as I could get into me. And then passed out until I found coke, and that just, oh my God. But I've made it so far. I tell my story a lot. And I was just recently in Arizona at development camp, and we had 40 kids that were draft picks in the last 3 years who sat there. I did 2 different groups. We split them up into 2 teams, and I watched, and the reaction on their faces when I got into the whole, you don't have to drink every day to have an issue. Guys coming up to me and shaking my hand after, and they're a little nervous because they can't really say much because they don't know if I'm going to say anything. And that's the problem in pro sports, is they're terrified to come clean. They're terrified to be honest, but because they don't want to lose an opportunity. But a number of guys were like, "Oh yeah, like you really changed the way I'm looking at myself." That's all I care about, right? Like, as long as, somebody out, I mean, it's a cliche to say, as long as I help one person, but I just want people to, everybody justifies their ridiculous drinking or drug use in the NHL because they don't do it every day, or in the OHL or wherever it might be. Um, you know, it's funny. You talk about addiction. It's not just drugs and alcohol. When I first got to Arizona this summer, management pulled me aside and said, one of the biggest issues we have now is screen time. COVID changed things. And now we've got kids that are so addicted to their phones. It's not just video games. It's just screen time in general. And they're so addicted to their phones. They get in bed at 11. It's 5 a.m. They finally put it down. They're trying to do a pregame skate, or they're getting to practice at 10 a.m, and it's like they're hungover. John, there's a player on the Montreal Canadiens who hasn't played in a year with a screen time addiction. And it's actually not a secret, but Jonathan Drouin it was a screen time addiction. And that was part of the reason why he didn't play last year. So, again, if it makes me feel better or it distracts me, I want more. And I know that's not uncommon. But that's kind of like, that's where I am today. And I work with a lot of young athletes, and I guess my objective is just to, obviously help them stay clean and sober, but it's more about teaching them about life and how life can be fun regardless. You're not lost without it, because there's so much fear about waking up tomorrow and not having it. What am I going to do? How am I possibly going to get through the next day without it? And there are ways to do that, and it opens up I mean, I could go on about the doors it's opened up and stuff like that, but
I had a quick question for you, Jamie. I have a bunch, but when you talked about the drug issue, and then realizing you had to put down the booze too.
Yeah.
When you got treatment, how long was that before you realized, like, you went there for a drug problem, then realized the drinking?
Within weeks, Dave. Honestly, within weeks. Like, it was because I was so cocaine focused, right? I was so drug focused, and I can remember, her name was Sue. She was a counselor there, and I remember her saying, "James, did you ever consider that? Like, have you ever used sober?" And yes, I eventually did. But when I started, no, I didn't. Like, all my poor choices were made drunk. And I started talking about times that I drank, and I started to hear my own stories, and I'm thinking, holy fuck, I got an issue. Like, that wasn't the only time I drank and drove. Like, I did it a dozen times and never got caught. Pulling over at red lights, opening the door and puking, and then keep going and laughing to your friends. The decisions, the choices that you make. When I started going through my stories, Dave, I realized, that, what, this is a bigger issue than I'm giving it credit for. I have a serious drinking problem because, listen, boys, like, if we were going out tonight and we were pre-recovery, sitting at dinner right now, and we're going out at 8:00, and now it's 6, okay? I wouldn't have a beer at dinner. That was me. I wouldn't have why would I have a beer at dinner? I'd have 2 Diet Cokes and a glass of water, because we're not going to start drinking until 8. So once I get to the bar, I'm going to start pounding, and I'm going to go hard fast. But I was the guy. Now, there are guys who would sit at dinner at 6:00 and be loaded too, right? But that wasn't me. I was all or nothing. It was, okay, well, I'm not drinking yet because we're still at dinner, that was the type of drunk that I was. But I mean, and the rush you'd feel when you're going out, and who you're going home with, or what are you going to do, or how much are you going to drink. And it's funny. It's so funny, boys. Like, I'll walk in somewhere with 6 Diet Coke now, and people are like, you're gonna fucking drink all those? Yeah, you're gonna drink 24 beer. What are you talking about? Yes, I'm gonna drink these 6. Look, I love it. I'm sorry, I'm hooked. Like, but they look at me like more than you ever believe. Guys are like, and girl, you're gonna drink all those? I'm like, yeah, probably. It's better than the 40 ounce of rye you're gonna pound tonight. You know what I mean? The 8 ball.
Yeah.
But a little aspartame, I'm not too worried about. But anyways, I realized it within weeks. They convinced me. It wasn't tough to convince me. I needed a change. So yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that I'm an alcoholic.
Jamie, man, I really related to all that, big time. Everything down to like being an athlete and then kind of going out drinking and then getting into cocaine and the exact evolution of it, man. It really that hit home. Same as like the partner situation. Um, but I had one question when you're talking about like your relationship with Christina, right?
Yep,
Christine.
that's correct. Yep.
Was she aware that you were using, or were you able
No,
to hide it from
no,
her?
no. She was not aware, and that's part of the
Okay.
reason we were able to stay together.
Yeah.
I mean, it was completely hidden from her. I don't know how. Well, I do know. I was really good at it. I was really good at it. And no one would have ever thought that I was using cocaine. Like it was so far fetched. Like you know what I mean? Like it was just not. I think. Yeah. Yeah. No, she didn't know. She didn't know until she did.
Yeah.
Until she did, and then and that was the end of us immediately.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was in
She's
the
still
same.
angry. She's still pissed. And I don't blame her. I don't blame her. It is what it is. You destroy a lot of people in the process, and you hurt a lot of people. And you know what? Her life has turned out wonderful, and she remarried and has we've raised an incredible daughter. Not necessarily together, but at the same time, and good for her. I'm glad that things have worked out for her. But yeah, she didn't know at the time. It was a complete surprise. Yeah, you
Jamie,
become a pretty good liar.
Jamie, with your daughter, how those conversations go when she started getting to that age of, when kids start to kind of experiment and stuff like that. Like, when did you have those conversations, or were there any?
Yeah, she it's hard to say. Like right now I have I remarried like 10 years later, and I have an 11-year-old and a 6.5-year-old right now. And those conversations have already really happened, to be honest with you. Like Bo, my 6.5-year-old, knows that Daddy doesn't drink. Daddy used to drink, but Daddy doesn't drink because it's not good for him anymore. He's allergic to drinking, is what Bo says. Because I'll say, if you're allergic to bees, you're allergic to bees, whether you get stung once or 100 times, and that's me, right? Like I drink one beer or 40, I'm allergic either way. So, but the conversations with Tyson and I were very open about everything. That's my oldest, and yeah, she's careful. I think in the back of her mind, my father, drinks too much, and my grandfathers on both sides. My grandfather killed himself. My mom's dad, when I was 15. He was an alcoholic, heavy duty alcoholic, and he shot himself. So it's in my family. So it is something I'm not afraid to talk to my kids about it. I'm not afraid to admit what I did. Um, it was really cool. One of Charlie is my 11-year-old daughter in grade 6. Last year, one of her teachers came up to me when I was picking them up, and she's like, Charlie told us that you were a drug addict, and explained that Daddy's a drug addict, and he doesn't use drugs anymore, and he hasn't used drugs in over, she said 50 years. She told her that I hadn't used in 50 years because time gets a little screwed up for kids. But she said you would have been really proud of her the way she was talking about it, and that's a 10-year-old. So I don't know if everybody's that open with their kids about it, but I mean, it's part of my life too. It's what I do. Like it's kind of, it's there. It's front and center. Tyson's careful. She's okay. How Bo and Charlie are going to be, I have no idea, but we'll see. I'm never going to tell my kids not to do something. What I'm going to tell them is you better know that, be aware, know yourself well enough, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Because that's what keeps us in those dark places, is we don't ask for help, right? Sorry, I kind of went on a little bit with that.
Yeah, it's all good.
Jamie, you were kind of you were talking about like talking to the players, and I think it's kind of like plant the seed in a way. You can kind of recognize signs as they develop. and know that it's okay to come forward and ask if you have an issue. I really admire that role and how the approach to it. But I'm more interested in wondering how you came about that role and what kind of inspired you to get involved with that.
Well, great. Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a teacher. I'm not a parent of these guys. Um, I played. I was in and around the game. I have really good friends that are still kind of in and around the game, and it started, I guess, with the Providence Bruins. A buddy of mine played there, um, and he brought me. He talked to management and said, "Hey, man, my buddy of mine's got a really good story." And there were some issues, I guess, back in whenever this was. It was early 2000s, and I went in and spoke to the Providence Bruins, and it went really well. And it I got tremendous feedback, and somebody who heard said, "Hey, I coach a prep school, Brooks Academy in Massachusetts," and I went and spoke there, and then it just kind of fed off of that. And I've spoken at different high schools and in the region in non-athletic, settings, but I'm kind of relatable because I didn't play pro, but I'm just a guy who was like them and wanted to play in the NHL, and things didn't. I'm not saying I was going to be good enough or anything, but they can relate somewhat. And so yeah, it just kind of evolved like that, and I kind of took it from there, and started. The word just kind of spread, and then I started doing schools, and next thing you know, I'm standing at Harvard talking to the athletic department. I'm thinking, what am I doing here? Like, what do I have to offer these guys? You know what I mean? But I spoke, and they thought it was great.
That's
So
awesome.
it's kind of cool the places it takes you, right?
Really
What,
cool.
yeah. What about the guys, Jamie? Like you talked to a lot of you're talking about the young guys' development. What about the
Yeah.
more like the veterans maybe that like are going to maybe be retiring and start and kind of going through a different transition in their life and those kind of things.
That's a great question too, David. It's tough because you know I'm good friends with Kyle Quincy, and Kyle played in Detroit and won a cup in Colorado, and he retired, and he has had a painkiller addiction and issue, which he talks about quite openly. And when you ask him if you would do it different, and he talks about how bad it is right now. I shouldn't. They were pushing it on me, and I was doing it, and I needed it to play, and it's horrible. But Kyle, would you do it again? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I want a cup. So it's really hard. Like when you get past a certain point, um, there are serious issues in the NHL with sleeping pills are a huge issue. Their travel schedules are all over the map. They're Ambien nonstop. Like on airplanes, they're trying to sleep, and guys get hooked on sleeping pills, pain medication, obviously in pro sports. But it's tough to convince. And cocaine has made a comeback. I mean, these guys have lots of money. They're young. Um, and it's funny, a lot of them stop because they'll meet a girl and they'll get married and they'll realize that there's more things in life. So it's a phase for some, but it becomes a serious issue for some. And there's some sad stories, of guys that we don't realize why their careers faded away or ended. Scott Darling, um, Scotty, I don't know if I have a picture of him up on my wall. I don't, but Scott's a kid that I adore, and we've he it's okay if I talk about this. I remember I got a phone call. He was at Maine, and he said, "Coach, I got suspended because I got caught drinking." And Maine's a dry school, right? So there's their coach, no drinking during the season. And I said, "Okay, well, one game, two games." He goes, "Well, it was one game, but then I got caught drinking in the stands during the game I was suspended for. So they threw me out of the program. So they pull a scholarship." Okay, so Scotty's now got no scholarship. Arizona or Phoenix at the time, who had drafted him, cut him loose. They said, "We don't want any part of you." And here's a 6'6" talented goaltender. So, he no talk about quitting drinking at all. Kicks around the minors. I get a phone call 2 years later. He said, "Coach, I'm in Vegas. I'm fucked. I missed the bus." I was playing in the SP, right, the Southern Pacific whatever league, and he said, "I missed the bus." And I said, "Well, catch it, man. Grab a cab. Do whatever you got to do." He goes, "No, you don't understand. That was 2 weeks ago." So if you look at his stats, there's a year where he only played like 3 or 4 games. That was that year where he stayed in Vegas for 2 weeks after he missed the bus. And then we got him clean. He got himself clean, but and he made a comeback. And he graduated to the East Coast League, and then the American League, and then the National Hockey League, and he was Crow's backup in Chicago, and played an instrumental role in winning a Stanley Cup. And and I talked to him through that Stanley Cup run, and I can remember him saying, like, "What if we win? Like, am I going to drink? Like, I hope not." And in the mean, I'm like, "No, you got this, man. Like, and he didn't. Then he signs a deal with Carolina. And goaltending is the one position in the world you can't hide. You can't hide if you're a goalie. It is, sixth line or a sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th forward. You can hide. You can play the role. You can as a goalie. They signed him 4 years, 16 million, number one goaltender. And it changed things for him. And I remember we were sitting at a Fuddruckers in Andover, Mass. And he's like, "Jamie, I don't know if I want to be number one. Like, it was perfect in Chicago. Like, this is tough." And Scott's, a strong-willed guy, but he broke. And he said, I've been drinking a little bit, and it started with 1 or 2 beers here and there. And he knows, like, he only became successful because he quit. His life's a disaster when he drinks. And it was 1 or 2, and then it was 3 or 4. And then I talked to guys in the league who were saying, "Oh man, we were out with Scotty a couple weeks ago, and he was pretty loaded." And it just spiraled out of control. He went back into treatment that summer before his first year in Carolina. And it lasted a few months. But, a year and a half later, they bought him out, and he's been out of the league ever since. And, we still communicate quite often. He's not clean and sober again yet. But he's aware, and he struggles with it. But it's a perfect example of using, and you're down here, and then he got to here, and it's the proof it's there, guys. When you're clean and sober, your life isn't always going to be perfect when you're clean and sober. Like, my life sucks sometimes. It's horrible, like, it really is. There are issues, and so it doesn't mean life's going to be perfect, but you have a better opportunity for your life to be better if you're clean and sober. And Scott's a perfect example of that. And God willing, he straightens his act out again. But it's that's just kind of like a side story about out of control, and a name that people kind of know, and they might be thinking, "Where is he now?" Well, he started to drink again, and now he's out of the league. That's how it affects some people. So
Yeah, it's funny. 'Cause I was going to mention, I don't know if it's a question, more of a comment. I think, like, a lot of people forget that, like, professional athletes or don't even, I don't know if they have like they just assume that they don't have any issues, that they're superhuman, right? And they don't have personal stuff going on, right? Like,
Kind of placed on a pedestal type thing.
yeah, they kind of forget.
yeah, and he said, "I don't know if I'm going to be the number one guy." He said, "It's all on me. I was Crow's backup in Chicago. It was perfect. I came in once in a while, no pressure. Now I'm the guy." And it broke him. It broke him. So yeah, and they're not, they're just like the three of us. Like, they know that it's wrong, and the guilt eats them up. But we've all been there. Anybody listen to this has been there too. It's hard to stop. We can, and you just one day have to fucking do it. But it's yeah, the proof is out there. It's hard to do, but the proof's also out there that it works. It does.
Absolutely. Jamie, I had a quick question for you.
Sure.
So you went to an outpatient before you went to an inpatient program.
Yes.
Do you find there were pros and cons of both, or what were your main takeaways from each one, do you think?
Well, the outpatient program I didn't really have a choice. It was like, we couldn't get into a treatment center. There was a waiting list everywhere. We tried all kinds of different facilities. I say we, I mean my parents and I. And then we found this, that, you went every day at 9 o'clock and you left at 5. And there was programs throughout the day, and it worked for me because I stopped my life, moved into my parents' place, and I was fortunate enough that I was able to kind of put my life on hold. It's hard for some people. They can't, they can't quit their job. They can't, I was in a situation where my mom and dad were able to kind of support and help me through this process. And the outpatient program was okay. I mean, you feel like a bit of a child. I did anyways, because my mom's driving me there in the morning. I'm 28, 7 years old, and she's bringing me back home. My parents are cooking me dinner. I'm living at their house, and but it was at the end of the day, it was a pretty good experience for me, and I was surrounded by people who were in the same situation, and that's what I can't emphasize enough to people, that a pregnant woman I can't talk to a pregnant woman about what it's like to be pregnant. I can't. I don't know. I don't have a clue. And most people don't know what it's like to be an addict. And so to be in that environment, and it was helpful. I think that I would have probably preferred to be in a facility at that point in time, because I felt very vulnerable. But pros and cons. I think there are more cons to being in an outpatient program than there are pros, personally, but it worked for me. But I really enjoyed the fishbowl of the being at Homewood, and they had a bowling alley, and we played baseball, and like you learned how to eat, and your diet, how important nutrition is, and so I coming out of treatment is hard, as I'm sure you guys know, and that's where I like to come in and help people, is when they are getting out, and that fear of leaving the fishbowl, right? You're not surrounded, and now you're on your own. When you first get out of that facility, those first 6 months are crucial. And that's. But anyways, to answer your question, I think I would rather do an inpatient all the way. But if you don't have a choice, you got to do both, right? Yeah.
Have you heard of the refuge recovery?
No, I have not.
Oh, okay, because we had a couple guests on that do that. It's a kind of like based on Buddhism kind of background, kind of mixes like the AA, I guess, and NA with that. So I was curious if you kind of heard of that at all.
No, but I really dug kind of deep into the whole meditation and spirituality, and have been on, like I said, a number of different meditation retreats, and like a couple in Joshua Tree, California, and silent retreats, and except for when you're in teachings, and or with a mentor where you can ask questions and stuff, and it's kind of cool. Like they say, you can listen to music, but listen to one song and then think on it. Or you can read a book, but read one page and think on it. Don't just get lost in it like an addict would, right? But yeah, so I can see how that would be very helpful, like the whole meditation, and just kind of slowing the brain down, right, man? Like I got a popcorn machine in my head that never stops. You know what I mean? Like, it is unbelievable. Right now, I got 162 things in my head right now, but I only have one thing I should be worrying about in this talk right here. But it's just, sometimes you need to slow down, right? But I'm damn grateful. 23 years. I forget sometimes how long it is. It's a long time. But I've got I got a tattoo here that says "Find a Way," like right there. You know what I mean? Like I look at that nonstop. Whether it's getting out of bed in the morning, or being on time for this, or whatever it is, I still, it's I don't know, use different things to help motivate yourself, I guess.
Yeah.
Dave, you got any more questions for Jamie?
Well, I was just gonna say, I was telling the guys before, when I first met you back quite a while ago, I didn't really know you. I didn't know your story, and I would have never thought. I mean, I don't really know how to word it. I think sometimes people think that if they're clean and sober, or if they get clean and sober, they're going to lose that life that they have. And I would never have thought, back then meeting you, that you were someone sober, because you're such an outgoing, funny guy, charismatic. Like,
Thank you.
and I think sometimes that's a stigma that, like, people think sometimes they're afraid they're going to lose whatever they
Who
have.
they are.
Who they are. So, I don't know. I think you're just a kind of a perfect,
or who they think they are.
example of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not easy. It's not easy, and I fight through it. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, "Fuck, am I ever uncomfortable right now?" But not now. But like in social situations, but it's you do what you got to do. I golf a lot because that's where I can be with my buddies, and I don't have. I mean, a few of them I'll have some beers in the golf course, but like that's kind of where I do my socializing now is on the golf course, and that's how I get to see everybody. And I still stay away from the nighttime situations as much as I can. And Army, the general manager of the Arizona Coyotes, to support me, he quit drinking, and he's 17 years sober just to have my back. He didn't have an issue. He did not have an issue, but 17 years sober now, just to I got you, man. And when you have a support group like that, and a group of friends that are willing to, take those types of steps, then I can't. There's a lot of people I don't want to let down, including myself, but mostly myself. But it's
That's
yeah,
great. That's
it's
amazing.
it's been an interesting life, that's for sure.
Awesome.
Absolutely, Jamie. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for everything that you do. And we're just really appreciative to have you here today.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure, and I yeah, any opportunity I have, to do something like this, I love it. So, Dave, I appreciate. It was great seeing you again, and I really appreciate you asking me to come on.
Yeah,
And anytime. And if you guys need anything, please just let me know.
Absolutely. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Thanks, boys.
Thanks,
All
man.
right.
If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, please reach out and ask for help. Thank you for listening.